My 23M boyfriend, M23, identifies as straight and it makes me feel weird.
We're both men. In December, we'll have been together for 2 years, but we were close friends for about 6 years before we started dating. This isn't about him being on the DL, down low, aka, not out, or something, because he doesn't hide the fact that we're together. All our friends know, our parents know, we go on public dates, we hold hands and kiss in public, and he introduces me to people as his boyfriend / doesn't have a problem with me introducing him as my boyfriend. We have, what I feel is, a totally normal relationship, except that he identifies as straight, and tells people that he is straight when they ask. I've talked to him about this multiple times, especially when we first started going out.
He had always said he was straight and I was worried that he was looking for a chance to experiment now that we were in college, rather than a potential relationship, which isn't what I wanted. I even told him I was worried about that at the time, and after talking for a while he explained it as me being an exception. To be totally honest, I thought that he was just in the process of coming out. I remember telling myself that Nick Jonas in Camp Rock 2 was an exception lol, and that eventually he'd realize he was bi or that his sexuality was more fluid. But since then, he has both casually and in a few more serious conversations reiterated that he's straight except for me. He says I'm the only guy he's ever been interested in.
Part of me is okay with that, because I don't need or want him to use a specific label or identify in a specific way, and I can't tell him what his sexuality is, but at the same time whenever he says he's straight or tells other people that he's straight, I get a weird feeling. It's like I feel out of place. I know he isn't denying I exist or something, but it does sometimes feel like a dig at our relationship. Like I said, I've talked with him about this several times, but I feel like I've been getting really close to telling him he's wrong about his sexuality, which doesn't seem like a healthy thing to do and also doesn't seem like it would be very productive.
He once offered in the past to avoid talking about his sexuality with people. This was in college, so it was a topic that probably came up more often than it does for most people, in queer student groups and stuff, but that didn't feel like a good solution because it felt overbearing, or that I was controlling which labels he could use. Other than this one thing, I'm very happy with him, and he actually brought up the topic of our future together post-grad school this week, as in, have you thought about where we should move after we finish grad school? So the general direction of our relationship seems to be very long-term.
I guess I don't really know specifically what question I have. I'm just wondering if anyone has any insight into this, or has any suggestions on how to approach this in a new way that doesn't make me feel like I'm invalidating him, and won't make him feel that way either. I guess ultimately, if this is how he identifies, that's okay with me, but I need some help getting around this weird feeling I have when I hear him say it. TLDR, my boyfriend identifies as straight and that makes me feel weird. We're otherwise happy together, so I'm not sure what to do with my weird feelings without telling him he's wrong for identifying the way he does. I've been in the same situation as your boyfriend, saying that my current spouse was the exception. In my mind, it felt perfectly accurate, and it was never meant in a way to hide anything or hurt anyone. It wasn't until about 8 years into our relationship, we've been together almost 13 now, that I realized that I wasn't straight after all. Looking back on it, I should have probably identified as bi. That said, I do think your feelings are valid, but in the end, as long as he loves you and sees a future with you, I don't think there's much to worry about. I agree with a lot of other posters, and feeling like the exception would make me feel uncomfortable and insecure. It would make me feel temporary. I don't fit into my partner's image of their future. I think it's valid to bring those feelings up with him. Not in a way that you're trying to get them to call themselves gay, but just that when they're holding hands with you and insist they're straight, it feels like being stabbed in the heart and saying that you're just a face. You could discuss other responses he could say that are more vague and just avoid saying he is straight in front of you, but that might be a big ask. What about the term heteroflexible? I used it for a bit before I'd explored enough with women to comfortably call myself bi. You could use it internally and maybe even bring it up in a bit of a joking manner with your partner. Hetero but you flex for me kinda way. It feels less like redefining their sexuality because it's mainly the word hetero with just a small tweak. For me, early in my sexuality journey, it was less threatening to my overall identity than taking the full plunge to bi. Bi-curious felt like a juvenile porno girl thing, so I rejected it. I feel you, brother. A valid feeling to have. To put a positive spin on it, you must be super cool to be the only guy out of billions that he would go for. Fair play. Your boyfriend may identify as straight because he truly does not feel attraction to other men besides you. He could be on the demi-scale, where he doesn't feel sexual attraction to men that he doesn't have romantic feelings for. But, with his insistence that he is straight despite being in a same-sex relationship, it can make you feel like your relationship is not stable, like it's just a phase, or that he does not consider you an essential part of his sexuality. He can reassure you that you matter to him, but it comes down to your own insecurities. The question isn't you trying to dictate his sexuality to him, but trying to reconcile his straight identity with being a romantic and sexual same-sex relationship. He may think that "you're my exception" is flattering, but it clearly just creates more worry and feelings of instability in you. At the same time, his insistence that he is straight despite being in a serious same-sex relationship could indicate some pretty strong feelings of internalized homophobia, like he's not gay because he's not like those gays. I totally get that feeling, because while I am personally primarily attracted to men, I don't identify as gay because I don't feel a strong connection to the gay community. I identify as bi or queer. You're leaving up a lot to guesses or inferences. It seems to me that the primary issue is feeling like you aren't important to him or don't matter, because he doesn't have any room for you in his sexual identity. Exception doesn't feel inclusive. It just highlights the incongruity in how you feel out of place. So, try to talking to him about how serious he is about the relationship, and what you mean to him. I hope this helps. I think if he's an empathetic, caring partner, he would understand that while he isn't intending to hurt or alienate you with his straight identity, it still creates worry. So I wonder if he doesn't realize or know that there are more options than being gay or straight bi. He feels straight because he's not interested in other men, and you are the clear exception. Is he actually actively interested in women? Like, does he see a woman and think she's attractive? I'm a married woman, but I'm not blind to seeing a hot guy or actor, musician. You say you were friends for years before dating. Maybe he would find demisexuality more clarifying, or pansexual, or maybe generally he's hetero-romantic but met you and obviously developed unexpected romantic feelings. Has he ever thought about fooling around with another guy? Not necessarily being in a relationship with one, just sexually. Sexuality is actually such a huge spectrum, but most of us were raised to only view two options. I'd suggest parsing through your feelings before bringing it up to him. You do have valid feelings and concerns, so maybe couples counseling wouldn't be remiss.
It could help you feel more secure and help him better articulate how he identifies.
To me, on the outside, it looks like internalized homophobia. I've read think pieces about men who have sex with men but identify as straight, but never from within a committed, public relationship of years. People balk at being labeled, but words are how we talk about things. A man who enjoys sex with men is not straight. Nah, it would bug me too. Like even saying I'm bi-curious would publicly acknowledge his attraction for you. I don't have any advice for you, but just saying I see you and that feeling is valid. Although TBF, while I'm a semi-pen romantic and my BF is bi, we present as a heteronormative relationship that nixes a lot of the problems we would come across as a couple. It wouldn't hurt to sit him down and talk to him about it the same way you've made this post. I absolutely would feel weird about it too. There's a fear of feeling like being an exception is a temporary thing, or that it's somehow a dig at the relationship. In general, it just doesn't feel great not being on the exact same page. Even if he doesn't mean anything bad by it, just talk to him about it, about why you feel weird, and what would make you both feel more comfortable. Your post is honestly a good summary, so you could start by showing it to him. For what it's worth, maybe the term "mostly straight" would help. Calling myself straight while holding my same-sex so's hand is feel like some weird erasure. Unnecessary confusion. At least mostly straight would acknowledge your existence. You could also do some sexuality shopping, as weird as that sounds. LMAO. Another post mentioned it here, but he may very well think there's only straight, bi, gay. But maybe realizing there's a spectrum over romantic, sexual would interest him. Or looking at the Kinsey scale or something. Obviously, you don't have to say this in casual convos, but I think it is satisfying to figure out the details even if labels don't ultimately matter and are fluid. You need to have a conversation with him about this. But before that, you need to get to the bottom of your own feelings. It's hard, but it's not really possible for your boyfriend to understand how it makes you feel with this when you can't articulate anything more than weird. I don't want to scare you. However, when I was with my two first boyfriends, as a sorta closet lesbian, I was strongly attracted to women and only attracted to my boyfriends because of their personalities. This was years ago, ages 16 to 23. I used to tell my friends that I was only Luke sexual. Luke was one of their names, etc., to try and justify myself even though I was gay AF. Since then, I've been only sticking with women and I feel so true to myself now. I could never go back with a man. I hope that is not the case, but I just wanted to share my experience in that regard. I mean, that weird feeling is entirely valid. Every time he tells someone he's straight, he essentially erases your relationship from existence. It doesn't fit with how he sees himself, so he just cuts it right out of his identity when discussing his sexuality. You can't force him to change the way he defines his sexuality. But I'm inclined to agree that he's deeply in denial about who he is. And that's not a comfortable place for you to be. Tells people that he's straight when they ask. Does he also bring it up on his own? Or is it only when other people ask? Why are so many people asking him his sexuality? That's a really nosy question. I never ask anyone about their sexuality. I won't even bring it up. If they want to tell me, they will. I agree that since he's attracted to you, then he's attracted to at least one man. And therefore he is at most 99.99999% straight and 0.00001% gay. If you had to put numbers to it. But it seems like he prefers not to put numbers to it. The solution is not to try to convince him he's a little gay, but instead to just stop talking about labels altogether. Our sexualities don't have to be such a huge part of our identities. Other things can be much more important. Have you ever asked him where he falls on the Kinsey scale? I know it's not a perfect scale, but chances are, even if he describes himself as straight, he is in a 0 on the Kinsey scale, which might be a helpful way for both of you to think about it. I guess if it comes up again, you could mention how bisexuality doesn't mean he's 50-50. It could fully mean he's 99.9% straight, and you're part of the 0.1% of men he's attracted to. However, I get his side of things. People tend to fully assume that bi means 50-50. So when he's asked about his sexuality, the most convenient thing to say is straight, since on a spectrum he's closer to straight than they. Typical 50-50 assumes implied by the bi label. I don't know how helpful this is, and honestly it'll probably get buried under a bunch of comments. But for what it's worth, I've always identified as ace. I think I cried the day I found out the terms existed, because I realized I didn't have to force myself to fit other labels that I honestly felt nothing for. That being said, recently I weirdly ended up falling for someone. Despite that, I haven't felt a desire to change my sexuality. I don't identify as a lesbian now. I think of it the way as your BF does. A surprising but not unwelcome exception to the rule. I think part of the reason we have so many variations on sexuality these days is because people feel pressured to fit them perfectly. And if they don't, it suddenly doesn't apply and they need to make a new one. I totally understand how you feel like him not changing how he identifies is a dig at your relationship. And hell, if I were in your shoes I probably would too. But I just wanted to add in my perspective, which is probably similar to your boyfriend's. Maybe it really is about how he feels about his own sexuality and not about appearances or making plans to move on. Dear Lord, your boyfriend is in some real fucking deep denial. Dude needs a therapist. Is it possible he wants to protection or privileges that being straight merits him that identifying otherwise wouldn't? It's no surprise that in men's culture, that men treat one another differently based on sexual orientation. Bi means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. A lot of bi men continue to use the straight label for a lot of different reasons. It sounds like he fits that heteroflexible mold that's becoming a more common form of identification. If he's dating someone of the same sex, he's not straight. It would bother me too if my partner would like about his sexuality. Doesn't matter, you're his only gay relationship. He's still not straight. That would bother me as well. I too would feel like your relationship doesn't count or something. Labels aren't needed, so I can see that being the argument, but in that case you wouldn't feel the need to label yourself as straight either. Have you asked him why he feels the need to identify as straight? He's heard your reasoning, but I don't see an exploration of his. That might help you to come to a compromise together or have a better understanding of where he is coming from. Maybe an example scenario. His dad identifying as gay, but in a hetero relationship with his mom would be a weird way to introduce him, and would be similar.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.